Welcome back to Whence, a Freemasonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. I'm your host, Brother Robert Johnson. This is episode 134. So, welcome back. I certainly hope your week has been awesome. Mine has been interesting, to say the least, but in any case, the show must go on. Not much in the way of news. I am working on Brother Charles Harper's book, Freemasonry in Black and White. I'm actually reading the book for the audio version, which is really cool. Very honored to do so. So progress is underway for that. I have to share the huge response we got on the Midnight Freemasons blog. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the rundown is this. Brother Todd E. Creason and Brother Brian Shimeon playfully argued back and forth along with others about which way we should be wearing our rings. Points in, points out. Well, they did a joint piece for the Midnight Freemason, and in the first day, that article had 6,000 hits. It was pretty darn amazing. Anyway, congrats to both Brother Todd and Brian on their awesome accomplishment. Again, I have to mention Brother Rob Walk Jr., who is now a member and regular contributor to the Midnight Freemasons, as well as the sole contributor to his own blog on Freemasonry and Humble Pie, which you can find on WordPress. So please check those out. If you're into manly stuff, you can check out another place that I'm doing some writing, which is Iron Mike Magazine. It isn't Masonic, but it's an online magazine dedicated to men being better as well. It goes in hand with Masonry in my book. So check that out if you're interested. It's ironmikemag.com. I got involved because I love history, making good men better, and really one of the big things I'm all about is supporting veterans. So that's a huge thing Iron Mike is all about. Honoring the veterans. So check those guys out. Speaking of other places, I hope you guys are checking out, of course, Brother Juan Sepulveda's excellent podcast, The Winding Stairs. If you listened last week, then you know his story, and you are probably listening to his shows now as well. It's a great show. Working backward a bit, I hope you guys are also listening to Brother Robert P. Lewis on the Far From Centered podcast as well as the Center Mass show. Both are on Google Plus Hangouts and on iTunes. Speaking of other shows, I hope you guys are checking out the Masonic Roundtable, which is a few Master Masons, as well as myself, broadcasting live on YouTube Tuesdays at 10/9 Central. We talk about all kinds of stuff that is Masonic. We have a few past Masters on the panel, and a few regular Masons as well, as Brother Juan Sepulveda and myself. So if that's at all interesting to you, please check out www.youtube.com/Masonic Roundtable. Make sure to find all these guys on Facebook and Twitter at The Winding Stairs 33, Robert P. Lewis, Far From Centered, Centered Mass, Masonic Roundtable, Midnight Mason. The list goes on. We've got so many great contributors and great writers and people that we're following and into that the list of people to follow is too long to name everybody. Anyway, let's get into the meat of this episode. And I wanted to read a piece for you from the Knights of the North. And I wanted to piggyback on the discussion that we had about dues last week on the Masonic Roundtable. So this piece is by Worshipful Brother Nathan C. Brindle, and it's called The Dues That Don't. A high-quality lodge must be paid for. Therefore, dues need to commensurate with this. The first of the two great pillars of Lodge Epicurean, the premier Europe Concept Lodge. Masons are cheap, and they love to gripe. Unattributed to protect the guilty, many years ago, Dwight L. Smith, past Grand Master and editor at the time of the Indiana Freemason, wrote the following in his pamphlet entitled, "Whither Are We Traveling?" Has Freemasonry become too easy to obtain? Fees for the degrees are ridiculously low. Annual dues are far too low. Everything is geared to speed getting through as fast as possible, and on to something else. The lodge demands little and gets little. It expects loyalty but does almost nothing to put a claim on a man's loyalty. When we ourselves place a cheap value on Masonic membership, how can we expect petitioners and new members to prize it? How indeed? Ed Smith was writing on this problem in the 1960s, nearly 50 years ago. 50 years later, the situation has not improved. It has only gotten worse as the worth of our money has devalued and the lodge dues and fees have remained, in large part, numerically the same. What's worse, we've lost half of our membership since Smith wrote those words. And what's worse than that, we have a huge cohort of members well out of proportion to their numbers and the general population, who pay no dues at all because they have reached 50 years in Masonry. In my lodge alone, these members amount to nearly a third of the total, and I doubt that we are exceptional in this regard. Forget reforming Social Security. We've got a crisis in our own midst, and the pinch is being felt right now. So why are we facing this monetary crisis? As Al Smith, no relation to Dwight, used to say. Let's look at the record. 1. Lower membership numbers. A case can be made that lower membership numbers aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they do suggest that the amount of money required to keep their fraternity solvent is going to have to come from a smaller cohort in the future, and in all likelihood, Masonic membership numbers will never again reach post-World War II levels. 2. Lodges are too quick to pull the trigger on non-payment of dues and requests for demits. In many Grand Lodges, annual losses from death are beginning to bottom out, but are being eclipsed by the suspensions for non-payment of dues, and demits are higher than suspensions. 3. More and more members are on fixed incomes. Many lodges opt to keep dues low because they have enough members paying dues to get by at the lower rates, while trying to protect older members who are on reduced or fixed incomes. 4. More and more members being remitted for seniority. By this is meant lodges in which all 50-year members are excused from paying dues, usually by Grand Lodge fiat. And 5. Public fundraisers traditionally held to keep lodge dues low don't work. In many venues, the summer lodge fish fry and the winter bean supper are no longer the big draws that they used to be. We've identified a few areas of trouble. There are unquestionably more, but this paper has to end at some point. So let's take a look at the ones above in more detail. 1. Lower membership numbers are a fact of life. Ever since the 1970s and the near total inability of the craft to attract the quote-unquote lost generation of baby boomers, sons of our older members, fathers of our younger members, our membership curve has been heading for the basement, with little or no recovery predicted. In Indiana, we have recently found that our losses from death have rounded the downward curve and have been slightly lower than in previous years. Annual losses from deaths topped out at 4,077 in 1968 and hovered in the 3,500 to 3,700 range for much of the next few decades. By 2004, they had dropped to 2,651 and have in fact been below 3,000 since the turn of the century. But this is still a large subtraction for a Grand Lodge that has raised only on average 1,666 new Master Masons each year since 2000. The Grand Lodge has added in total only an average of 2,791 members, including affiliations, restorations, and other reasons, each year in the same period, while losses from all causes averaged at 4,512 per year. Why are our losses continuing to mount? 2. As it turns out, the largest loss of membership, in Indiana at least, comes from demits and suspensions for non-payment of dues. Consider the following table. The year 2000. 5,084 deaths, 2,928 demits, 1,360 suspensions. 2001, 4,955 deaths, 1,155 demits, 909 suspensions. And these numbers climb all the way up to 2004 with 5,329 deaths, 1,612 demits, and 1,055 suspensions. It is clear that while deaths may be bottoming out, remember they topped out at 4,077 way back in 1968, both demits and suspensions are trending significantly higher. In the old days, a man didn't demit or get himself suspended for non-payment of dues unless and until the lodge had exhausted all means of investigation and remedy. For the man who wanted to demit, it might not have been as simple as, I can't pay my dues, or I'm moving out of the state and transferring to the lodge there. There was always the possibility of disharmony that could be patched around to alleviate the problem. And for the man who couldn't pay his dues, there was remission, or a generous brother would step up and fulfill his duty to contribute relief. Today, lodges often don't want to go to the trouble. Often, after all, we send due statements out, and when the dues don't get paid by the due date, the secretary sends a notice to the members in arrears. Finally, there is a set procedure for the dues committee to follow each month until finally charges are filed and trials held for non-payment. Not all lodges, however, take heed of the admonishment to contact personally each brother who is in arrears and ascertain if there's a problem. And unfortunately, many of our older brethren consider asking for remission, something akin to the mark of Satan. As a secretary, I've heard, quote, "I don't want charity," far too many times from brethren who know full well that the lodge is there to help them if needed. And demits. Every Mason has the right to demit. I suspect many lodges just accept requests for demits unquestioned, even though they are supposed to make personal contact to investigate the brother's reasoning. In sum, while annual losses to death are bottoming out, it's not time to wipe our brow and sigh in relief. We've got other problems to deal with that cut into our numbers just as badly. 2. The fixed income issue is to some extent quite real. While it's true that the retirees typically do not draw the kind of monthly income from pensions and Social Security that they did while working at their pre-retirement careers, the fact of the matter is that senior citizens today have more disposable wealth than at any other time in the nation's history, but not all of our members are among the group that can comfortably cruise, travel, play golf, maintain a second home in Florida, or otherwise enjoy a relaxing life at 65. Many of our members continue to work in lower-paying jobs after retirement, not just for something to do, but because they wouldn't be putting food on the table if they didn't. But that doesn't translate automatically into an inability to pay the dues. The fact is, though, that most of our lodges aren't charging anywhere near the percentage of household income for dues that they were even 50 years ago. The burden of lodge dues is not nearly as great for today's retirees as it was in earlier times. Even a lodge charging $100 a year, as mine does, is asking for less than $10 a month to fund its programs. You probably can't get the senior citizens plate at the local cafeteria for $10 anymore, and your monthly newspaper subscription probably runs at least that much, and probably more. And let's not get into how many, or in fairness, how few Starbucks lattes you can buy for that. 4. 50-year awards are great. They are a landmark on a long and well-lived life, regardless of whether the brothers receiving them have been active members in their lodges. At some point in the middle 1940s, Indiana decided that 50-year members should also get something a bit more financially rewarding. They would be excused from paying dues, including Grand Lodge assessments, Masonic home assessments, and lodge dues for the rest of their lives. In other words, they would be granted seniority remission. Now, in a time when the actuarial table suggests that very few men would live to the age of 71, the minimum age for a man to receive such an award, given that at that time one had to be 21 in order to petition a lodge in Indiana, and in fact, life expectancy at birth for a male in 1940 was only 60.8 years. This meant both a great deal and not much at all. A great deal in that a man who lived that long probably deserved a special recognition, and not much at all in that very few men ever got the 50-year award, and no longer had to pay dues. Flash forward to 2006. In my lodge, there are about 170 members, 44 of whom have received the 50-year award of gold and are excused from paying dues. That means almost 26% of the members of my lodge are paying no dues at all, and 5 more will receive the award in 2006. I would suggest that this is untenable, and I am not alone. The Grand Master of Masons in Indiana recommended at the 2005 annual communication that we begin a 10-year process of raising the seniority remission age to 60. The award would still be awarded at 50 years. Of course it was voted, if not shouted down. The general attitude seems to be that 50-year members have paid enough, a curious concept given that plenty of men reach retirement, as I myself will, without the faintest chance of ever becoming a 50-year member. We will continue to face the reality of ever-rising costs to the lodge that will require higher and higher dues, while significant numbers of our lodge brothers who happened to come into the fraternity years before we did are able to sit comfortably and not pay dues for perhaps 5, 10, 15, or 20 years or more. In an organization based on fairness and meeting on the level, how exactly do we justify this? At any rate, the life expectancy of males today is 74.5 years. So here's a radical proposition. Why aren't we giving the award at 50 years and granting seniority remission of dues after 75 years, when we would give the 75-year award? That would put things back very much as they were when the Grand Lodge originally envisioned them. When the 75-year award was instituted in Indiana in 1995, it was clear that the number of Masons making it to that threshold was significant. That means that in Indiana, we actually have living members who have spent 1/3 of their Masonic lives paying not a dime in dues to their lodge or in assessments to their Grand Lodge. This is not to say that they should have, but at the very least, we should not grant automatically seniority remission at 50 years without an investigation into whether or not the remission is actually needed. We should be, quote-unquote, means testing for this, much as the local Scottish Rite Valley currently does, and remission should be turned down if a brother can't afford to pay dues. As with Social Security, we've gotten ourselves into a situation where fewer and fewer of us are subsidizing more and more of us who don't pay dues, and it will be difficult to make those who have fully bought into the program see its inherent unfairness. In 1994, there were 14.58 dues-paying brethren for every 50-year members being remitted. In 2004, there were 6.5. Is this program indefinitely sustainable? You tell me. As for having paid enough, well, that might be true if dues money was an investment that would continue to pay dividends for the rest of the time. For my part, I believe that Grand Lodges offering life memberships or life endowment programs need to expand their scope and make it easier for members to join those programs earlier in life when they may be making more money, but also have families to support. For Indiana, my recommendation would be to ease into a program of exchanging remission for life endowed memberships. The existing life endowment program, which allows one to buy in with a single payment or by dividing the full payment into 3 annual payments, needs to give members more time to buy in. Perhaps there should be a sliding scale of the number of payments allowed based on the dues amount. If dues are under $75, 3 payments. Dues $76 to $100, 4 payments, and so forth. Or it could be based on the total amount required to be paid into the annuity instead. To be completely crass and mercenary, but at the same time entirely truthful, it is only with a lifetime endowment that pays off even after a brother dies that a brother can ever truly be said to have quote-unquote paid enough to warrant not having to have paid dues any longer. 5. Traditional public fundraisers don't work anymore for many lodges, primarily for 2 reasons. First, the older generation is tired of doing them, and the younger generation wants to be of service to the community, not so much to themselves. And second, because so many charitable organizations are competing for our shrinking discretionary income these days. The public perception of Masonic fundraisers, if there is such a perception, is more than likely that they are just one more hand sticking a palm up. The damage in this situation is that Masonic fundraisers usually don't benefit the community at large, but rather are designed to raise money to fix the roof or replace the furnace or paint the lodge hall. Most younger Masons rebel at the thought of becoming cod batterers at the fish fry or serving up beans at the annual bean supper to begin with. Most older Masons don't understand why not, after all. Those things are traditions. But the real fundamental misunderstanding is that the younger generations have been brought up in an environment that encourages service to others, while the older generation sees nothing wrong with the public at large helping support the Masonic Lodge. So what is the obvious solution to these problems? Well, raise dues and fees, of course. I can hear the arguments already. We can't do that. We've never had to do that before. We make enough from our fundraisers to get by. Why dues and fees are too high now? Really? Are they? Let's look at what Dwight Smith had to say about that 50 years ago. In 1911, Floyd F. Oursler was making $10 a week as an apprentice printer. The fee for the 3 degrees in Winslow Lodge number 260 was $20. That was the full amount of 2 weeks' pay. Of course, in 1911, a dollar was worth $1, and there was no withholding tax for printers making $10 a week, no gross income tax, no Social Security. Just the same, $20 was 2 weeks' pay, all of it. And Floyd Oursler thought enough of Freemasonry to empty his pay envelope twice to enjoy the privilege. Today, 50 years later, the minimum fee that may be charged by a lodge in Indiana has been increased to $30, and 1 lodge out of every 5 charges the absolute minimum that the law will permit. If the lodge minimum fee were still $20, I darest at say 75 lodges will be charging that figure. If the same relationship between wages and fees are as prevailed in 1911 were maintained in 1962. Lodges now charging from $30 to $60 will be charging $100 to $150, and the fraternity probably would be stronger and better thereby. Most Worshipful Brother Dwight wanted lodges in 1962 to charge between $100 and $150 in fees. According to the U.S. government's Consumer Price Index inflation calculator, that means he would want lodges in 2006 to charge between $675 and $1,000 in fees. $1,000 to petition. Are you kidding? Why, that's enough to give a whole sideline of past masters sprained index fingers. And so far as dues are concerned, Broad Ripple Lodge in 1904 charged $4 per annum. We raised our dues in 2003 to $85, effectively $58.30, exclusive of all Grand Lodge assessments. In 2005, our dues were raised to $90, effectively $59.05, and in 2006 to $100, effectively $68.05. $4 in 1904 was the equivalent to $82.09 in 2005. Are we keeping up with inflation? I don't think so. And at Broad Ripple, our dues and fees put us among the top 10 or 15 lodges in the state. Imagine what the lodge still charging $15 to $20 per year exclusive of Grand Lodge assessments is doing for operating revenue. In 2005, there were 8 lodges in Indiana charging in that range. The average per lodge was $47.18. Dues are low today because 50 years ago the volume made up for value. When membership peaked in the 1950s, there were so many Masons that you didn't have to charge much for membership in order to keep the lodge solvent, and members got so used to cheap dues and low fees that even as membership tumbled in the late 1960s and 70s, they refused to raise them to at least keep pace with the losses and with inflation because, quote, we'd never had to do that before. Well, brethren, with all due respect, what's the alternative? Several years ago, I considered very briefly joining a prestigious downtown club here in Indianapolis. I knew from the start that it was a budget buster for me, but I was interested to see what the dues structure was like. My eyes were opened quite wide. As a resident member of age 37 and above, I would be charged an initiation fee of $3,000, then monthly, not annual dues of $120, plus $15 a month for the Capitol Building Fund. In other words, in the first year, I would be dinged for $4,620 and then $1,620 each year afterwards, assuming no increases in dues. The first year I was a Mason, it cost me $141.50. The year after, $60. Brethren, we're selling ourselves far too cheaply. Our dues simply don't anymore. Our initiation fees are a disgrace to the craft and encourage far too many unworthy men to challenge our West Gate. It's time to raise dues and fees to what the market will demonstrably bear. And it's time to stop automatically granting remission of dues to a significant and growing segment of our brethren. In states that have a life membership program, it should be made easier for brethren to get into those programs, possibly by stretching out the number of years over which payments can be made into the annuity. Otherwise, we can look forward to more years of dwindling and mediocre membership, decaying buildings, and lost opportunities. As a member of what was once considered the premier society of gentlemen, that prospect holds no joy for me. All right, that paper will be available like the rest in the bonus features of the app. And where do you get the app? Well, if you visit the website at www.wcypodcast.com and click on the Support the Show tab. In there, you can find links to all the places that support this show, the apps which give you streaming access and bonus features like the papers that we read, as well as Masonic wallpapers. Also, there are affiliate memberships with onit.com, which is basically healthy living stuff like Alpha Brain, which is vitamins for your brain. It helps with laser focus and keeps you on your edge. It's really great. There's no caffeine, no sugar, just kind of a brain supplement. It's really awesome. I use it myself. Another way is through our affiliate with freemasonryart.com. You go there, check out the artwork, and remember, anywhere that's on the support the show links, you can use the coupon code WCY. And it gives you 10% off pretty much everywhere. So there's also even a PayPal direct donation where you pick the donation amount, and that's it. So there are several other ways that are on there, even Bitcoin, to donate to the show and keep this show running. So check those out, and thank you in advance. Next is this week's famous Freemason. This week is Frederick Russell Burnham, Born May 11th, 1861, passed away September 1st, 1947. He was an American scout and world-traveling adventurer, and he is known for his service to the British South Africa Company, then the British Army in colonial Africa, and for teaching woodcraft to Robert Baden-Powell, becoming one of the inspirations for the founding of the International Scouting Movement. Born on a Sioux Indian reservation in Minnesota, Burnham learned the ways of Native Americans as a boy. By the age of 14, he was supporting himself in California while also learning scouting from some of the last old cowboys and frontiersmen of the American Southwest. Burnham had little formal education, never finishing high school. After moving to the Arizona Territory in the early 1880s, he was drawn into the Pleasant Valley War, a feud between ranchers and sheep herders. He also worked as a civilian tracker for the United States Army in the Apache Wars. Feeling the Old West was becoming too tame, Burnham took his family to southern Africa in 1839, seeing Cecil Rhodes's Cape to Cairo Railway project as the next underdeveloped frontier. Burnham distinguished himself in several battles in Rhodesia in South Africa and became Chief of Scouts. Despite his U.S. citizenship, his military title was British, and his rank of major was formally given to him by King Edward VII. In special recognition of Burnham's heroism, the king invested him into the Companions of the Distinguished Service Order, giving Burnham the highest military honors earned by any American in the Second Boer War. He became friends with Baden-Powell during the Second Matabele War in Rhodesia, and passed on to him both his outdoor skills and his spirit for what would later become known as scouting. Burnham returned to America and became involved in the national defense efforts, business, oil, conservation, and the Boy Scouts of America. During World War I, Burnham was selected as an officer and recruited volunteers for a U.S. Army division similar to the Rough Riders that Theodore Roosevelt intended to lead into France. For political reasons, the unit was disbanded without seeing action. After the war, he and his business partner, John Hayes Hammond, formed the Burnham Exploration Company and became wealthy from oil discovered in California. Burnham joined several new wilderness conservation organizations, including the California State Parks Commission, and in the 1930s worked with the Boy Scouts of America to save the bighorn sheep from extinction. This effort led the creation of the Cofa and Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuges in Arizona. He earned the Boy Scouts of America highest honor, the Silver Buffalo Award, in 1936, and remained active in the organization at both the regional and national level until his death in 1947. To symbolize the friendship between Burnham and Baden-Powell, the mountain beside Mount Baden-Powell in California was formally named Mount Burnham in 1951. Alright, that's it for this week. Please remember to find us on Facebook, share our page with everyone you can. The same with Twitter, follow us at Whence. I'm trying to get the Facebook likes up to 4,000 and the Twitter followers up to 1,000. So do me a favor and spread the word. Check out all those great places for Masonic Light, including a new one that I just found out about. It's called Freemasonry101.com. Everything you want, Masonically speaking, of course, is right there. It's an amazing website. You can listen to our show there. You can listen to The Winding Stairs there, I believe. I believe you can listen to Eric Diamond's program. Not to mention there's an interactive version of Mackey's Encyclopedia. Just an incredible website. They have lots of cool stuff, so check it out, Freemasonry101.com. Please keep sharing the Midnight Freemasons and the Masonic Roundtable. If you have been watching the Masonic Roundtable, make sure you let Jason know how much you love my bow ties more than his. Anyway, as always, check out PB&J Water for all of your water purification needs and fraternal ties for the best neckwear anywhere. All the best to you guys in the coming weeks. Stay on the level. And for Whence, I'm Robert Johnson.